Jan and I, can you, I'm not muted.
No,
Good. I'm good.
and I'm not
Okay.
either. Okay.
Jan and I shared questions, which I cannot find. Jan, do you have those? in
I
front of
have
you?
your questions.
Oh, good.
I
Okay.
do.
So if you'll remind me of my questions when we come to,
Okay.
do you want to flip a coin to who asks the first
I don't care.
question?
You go. I mean, if you want.
No. Let's flip a coin. That's more
Okay.
fun. What do I have here? Oh, I don't even have a coin. Anybody got a coin?
No.
This is already so dramatic.
You go. I've decided. You go.
No, you can't do that. Here, hang on. I'll get a coin. You all talk.
I'll get a coin.
A penny or anything? No.
I'm not in my usual spot. So.
Okay, Jan, I'm thinking of a number from 1 to 2. What do you think it is? And I'll be 2.
Two.
It was 2. Okay, so I'll go first then if you want me to go first.
Okay.
Okay, so what's my first question?
How was your own experience of family? How did it inform Thicker Than Blood? Thicker Than Blood is the name of my novel.
Yes, your novel about adoption, which has many generations of women dealing with the adoption.
Yes,
Of
right.
yeah. So how does your experience of how did your or does your experience of family inform the Thicker Than Blood?
Well, I think my experience of family informs all of my writing, but specifically the issue of adoption informed this novel and inspired this novel because my mother was adopted. She was an adoptee who her entire life said, I'm not interested in finding out anything about my birth family. I'm fine. I have no feelings about it. It was an easy thing. I never quite believed her. I, as her child, however, was very curious about those stories, about the things that I didn't know. And one thing now, the adoptions in our novels are very different. The circumstance of the adoption in my novel, there's more than one adoption, but the major adoption is that the main character, Andrea, who's a single white woman, takes on as a foster child an African-American infant who's been abandoned at a church. So she knows nothing about this child's past, absolutely nothing. And one thing that interested me about adoption was how, in some case, in a closed adoption, how you often know nothing. And particularly in this case, there was no way that the adoptive mother knew anything except the fact that the child was an African American. She knew nothing else. She assumed she was born in the neighborhood and all of that. So that inspired the novel, just the idea of secrets, the idea of things that you don't know about other family members, either because you can't because of circumstances or because people are keeping secrets. So that spurred on the whole idea. After my mother died, I did a search. I found out things about her family. I saw a photo of her mother, which my mother never saw. I saw the house where my mother was born, all of these things that my mother never wanted to do. So I was curious and I invented from there. So for you, but how did adoption inform your novel, and how did you
Hang on a second. When I said, how did your experience of family inform your book? You have portrayals of teenagers. My daughter, who's 26 now, is in the next room, so I got to speak soft here. But the portrait of adolescence with a wild girl.
Okay.
And I mean, did you have a daughter?
I have 2 sons.
Okay.
In some ways, it was easier to write about a daughter than.
Did you have a sister?
No.
So you're portraying these relationships that weren't in your own family, because the sister relationship and the daughter relationship and the mother relationship drives the whole book.
Right. Well, I had a mother, but I didn't have a sister and I don't have a daughter.
Oh.
But I was a teacher and I taught adolescent girls for many years. So,
You saw them and their families then.
Right. I wasn't an adolescent. I was a very, not a rebellious adolescent at all. So it was based on things I experience or saw, not
Interesting.
experience.
It's a great portrayal of what do you do with this crazy young daughter who's going nuts. It was
Well,
and so many people go through that experience, I think. Cool.
what I
So
tried to, yeah, because this woman is trying her best to do the right thing, and she's just missing the boat with this child. She's trying to make everything positive and good, and she's failing to see who her child is, which
That's
can
such a great
happen with
shared
biological children too, of course.
That's such a great shared experience. I mean, there are so many people, you count something that so many people go, oh yeah, 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 stop. I
Well,
mean, I was telling your protagonist there, stop, it's useless,
I
and she
know,
kept on going. It was
I
like
know, I
terrible.
know. We make mistakes, so.
So you could ask me a question then.
I do. I want to know how, first of all, how you're, I'm not sure which came first. You're interested in Ethiopia or you're interested in adoption, specifically Ethiopian adoption. I know you, did you found the Awasa Children's Center? I know you traveled to Ethiopia. Where did your,
I can tell you.
yeah, your
Okay,
interest in
yeah,
Ethiopia?
I'm a theater person and I was working with kids in Chicago in the projects.
Mhm.
In
Right.
Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor Homes and all these different things. But I do theater a lot. And I have a German friend who got connected to Ethiopia because his best friend married an Ethiopian woman. He was a godfather.
Uh-huh.
His best friend died. He went to visit the
Mhm.
godchildren who the mother had taken back to Addis.
Uh-huh.
And then he wrote me and said, I mean, I do a whole show about this, and there's an article that I wrote for American Theater Magazine about this, but he wrote me and said, there's a troupe of street kids that my friend's friends is feeding, and they're doing circus stuff in the street, and you're working, you are working with the children in Chicago, in the ghetto. So what can we do? And I'm going, oh, Herman, it's really different. I think, African Americans and Africans. But I said, maybe do an age education circus. And he said, okay, come on, let's go. And I said, okay, where's Ethiopia? And then I was there working with the children of the Southern Dawn Circus and co-founding with them, ages 18 and younger to about 9, what became One Love Theater. Yeah. So I got, and then there was a lot of adoption energy when I got there in 2002.
That's when you
And I helped found kind of an orphanage circus center, but it started turning into an adoption thing. And we had a lot of meetings and decided, no, we want children to stay here and we want to find foster parents for them here. We don't want to be part of what they call the baby market,
Mhm.
And so I saw that happening, and I saw my own organization just drifting there. Whatever you said, it was going on, because
Yeah.
everybody's got a hustle there.
Yeah.
And babies were a really good hustle. And so
Yeah.
I split from that original group that I founded and just did One Love Theater. And we got our own money. And they were kind of pissed because they were relying on the age education circuits for the money. That's another novel, actually. But I got into adoption through that, and corrupt stories of corrupt adoptions and seeing some.
Yeah.
So that's
It's
how
a
I got
problem.
into that.
Susan.
On.
Oh, apparently, well, I'm not going to change. So my sons, for some reason, we're on 2 places now. So how long did you spend there?
I spent on and off of 3 or 4 weeks a year for 9 or 10 years, and sometimes
Wow.
2 months, and
Wow.
sometimes 1 week to put out a fire, like I had to
Wow.
do it. But anyway, it's my turn to ask you a question.
Okay.
So what's my second question to you?
You told me you came to writing late. From where do you draw your great eye for succinct description of settings and feelings? I mean, I did kind sort of sheepish about that. I did come to writing in my mid-30s, but I've always been a language person and a reader, and always involved and interested in and I was a language major and taught language for many years. So I've always been interested in language. And again, I backed into it. It was I signed up for, in my mid-30s, I signed up for a writing class at the Newberry Library in Chicago. And I literally told myself, well, I'll take the class, but nobody's going to make me write. I don't have to write. I'm an adult. I'm just going to, and and then I
had
wrote. So
students
it was,
like you.
I was really in denial, like, I'll do this, but nobody can make me do it. I'm not. So I don't know why I came to it late, but I did. So at this point, I've been at it a long time, but.
I guess my question was, because your descriptions of rooms, you are the queen of descriptions of messy rooms, actually. I mean,
well, that comes from my life, so I do know what that's all about.
I mean,
so.
just a bit, but your ability to describe something, the visual detail. I thought you were a painter or a photographer and had come to writing from your incredible descriptions of places and also your incredible detailed descriptions of feelings. I mean, you go through, okay, Amanda's going through this, and then wow, and the changes and all the real, I could feel that was the process of thought. You described it so well. So I thought you came from a photography or some other kind of art background, but
not
no.
me. No, my husband is a painter and my son is a painter, but I am not a visual artist at all. But I love I mean, I love art, but no.
Well, your description of detail is really impressive in that book. And if you see in both of Jan's books. Cool. Okay.
Well, that's I want to I'm interested. I'm skipping around a little. Did you know your novel was going to take place over 20 years? Was that part of the plan, or did it just grow and grow and grow? I think it works, and I love following these families over this period of time. But was that your initial? Did it grow and grow larger than you originally conceived of it?
I wrote an outline, and it took me 3 months.
Okay.
And with years and chapters and what might happen, starting in about 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept to the outline for about 100 pages. But then, I mean, the whole thing was based on Meles Zenawi, the prime minister of Ethiopia. He was a Tigrayan, and now they're kicking the ass out of the Tigrayans. But the whole thing was based on Meles dying in 2016. Mm-hmm. But he died in 2012, you know, at about page 100.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then I realized that the springboard of the outline. And I kind of had an idea of what might happen, but the characters, after about page 100, they started telling me a lot of different stuff.
Mm-hmm. Did you know? Oh, go ahead.
And they kind of took over to a point where I realized what the ending was, because I didn't have an idea. And I headed for it. I headed for 2019 and about 2016.
Okay. Well, one thing, you had to get the child old enough to be, I mean, you had to take her through stages of her life. Kaylee had to be, she started as an infant and then you had to take her through adolescence. And had you originally planned to take her through all of those stages?
No. I hadn't planned on it, but it kind of had to be, because I was dealing with the people I knew who were growing up. So I was kind of writing it as the kids I'd met in 2002 were growing up, and as my daughter, who was a huge influence, was growing up.
Boy, it would be hard to write a novel about an adolescent girl when you have an adolescent girl at home. No? I mean, I wrote.
No. You're getting information. I mean, it's great. I mean, it makes it kind of worth it.
Okay, that's right. It's all research. It's grist for the mill. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't intellectually process things sometimes, because I'm an actor also, so I can embody different characters and I see where they go.
Right. That speaking of which, one thing that really intrigued me about the novel was the way the voices were shown. There was a lot of, it seemed very performative. There were a lot of monologues, there were some dialogues, there were phone conversations where you hear just half. It seemed very much like this could be performed by a number of different people. And do you think that was, do you agree with that? And do you think that's comes largely from your acting theater background?
Well, I chose to not use the third person anywhere
I know.
in that book. And I decided that the day, before I started the whole deal. I said, and because I write monologues and dialogue,
Yeah.
that just came out. And then,
Right.
of course, the trick is the third person is one person talking a long story about what the hell happened. But it's not like you're avoiding the third person. It's just the objective voice is gone.
Right, right.
So
Well,
if
I
you
thought,
put-
you nailed the voices of all these different women, an adolescent, an African-American woman, Lisa, the adoptee, you nailed her voice, the African voice. You did such a great job of embodying those first person voices, many of them over the course of the novel. So that was really impressive.
That was really fun.
Good.
And really hard,
Mhm.
because the first version, if I'm writing a Black woman from the South Side, the first version is going to be full of bullshit and cliches, and you really have to refine it down. And
Right.
the same thing for if you're writing three different sisters. I mean, these kids in Ethiopia, but the distinctions between the three girls.
Right.
So I had to go back into my actor memory, whatever. I don't know how that happened, but it started happening. And I figured I was really on to something if I could nail it. But do I have the balls to do it? Because all the shit I could take for appropriation of
Right.
8 million things. But I didn't let that stop me. And I'm glad I didn't. Because
Good, because that's
I
a
haven't
tricky.
I haven't caught too much shit for it yet.
Well, I don't think you should, because I think you carried it off. But it is a tricky time to try to embody the other, particularly crossing gender lines, race lines, all of that at national. It's tricky, but I think I'm on the side of yes, you should do it. So I'm not likely to criticize, but I think you did a good job. I'm glad you're not getting.
I'm thrilled that so many of my women friends dig it. And my Ethiopian friends dig it, and one or two don't. They say that's wrong. It's not like that. But only one or two out of so I think I'm happy. I'm scared if it gets popular, I'm gonna have to hold my tongue a lot and just I understand your feelings and I'm gonna think about it, kind of stuff. And
Right.
if it gets popular, but I hope I have to go through that because I really want it to get popular.
Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Be nice to make the money. Yeah.
Yeah, well.
Okay, my turn to ask you something. What should I ask you?
Oh, I don't. If you're asking me what you should ask me. Okay. Let's see. How many drafts did you write? If more than one, were the different functions of the different drafts? The novel started, actually, I wrote a number of short stories over the years, and they were going to be completely different short stories. So it spanned a long time, many drafts, uncountable drafts. And then I had one story that was a woman adopting a Guatemalan child. And then I thought, maybe I realized I've been working toward this issue of adoption. So I just imported that story. I had another story that actually had happened to me. I was pickpocketed in Paris and lost my wallet. Did not have the other things happen to me that happened to my character, but I thought, well, I can bring that in too. So, and I'd conceived of this book as a linked story collection. And I fought, I wanted that. And then I eventually got to the point where it was going to be a novel and I could break down. I didn't have to reestablish with each new story that this is a white mother and a African-American child and all of that. But I really fought that for a long time. So drafts, I don't know, but it started single stories, linked stories to a novel over years.
Over how many years?
Oh, 6, 7. And some of the stories have been written even earlier. So a long time. I think that's a long time. So,
does anybody out there have a question, or, do you know our books, or you want to talk about writing?
let's see. Are there any in the chat?
I'm not hearing from anybody.
I have more questions. So.
I'm raising my hand just quickly,
Bonnie.
Jan. It's
Hi,
Bonnie.
Bonnie.
Hi.
My friend.
Yeah, I'm sorry I haven't read David's book, so I can't query you on those. But you just said something, Jan, that it was new to me, and that is that you fought writing a novel, that you had it in your head that you're going to write a short story.
Right.
So I just wondered, I guess, why? Is it just it's such a monumental challenge?
I didn't think I could. And so I was in a short story group, and I was writing short stories, and I was happy to write a short story. And I love short stories. I knew how hard it was to get a collection of short stories published. And I thought, well, maybe I should, and then somebody had suggested that maybe I, put your short stories together, make them into a linked story collection. So I thought maybe that can count as a novel. So then I moved to the novel group. But I'm the linked story person in the novel group. It took me a long time to believe that I could write a long.
Was there a particular point in the collection of linked stories, a particular story, or quotation marks around that word, that made you realize you could do the novel?
Well, I had someone give me advice saying, this is a novel. You're clinging to this short story thing. And I realized, as I think I said, that, I had to keep reestablishing with each chapter. At least I felt I did. And when I didn't have to do that anymore, it kind of opened things up and allowed me to carry certain characters through. And it just felt really liberating, but I didn't think I could do it. So.
Great. Thanks.
I'd like to say that I have 16 published novels with several different publishers, and I could never write a short story. I don't know how I would begin. I feel like I'm too stupid to write a short story, because you have to know what you're doing.
Well, I think that it's not, there are people who write long, and there are people who write short. And
well, but it takes smarts, at least that I don't have, to write short. And if you give yourself the room to write long, then you don't have to do anything. Then you just get on it, and then the characters write the book, and you don't have to know what the plot is, or you don't have to know how, what happens. You find out what happens. So to me, writing short story is way, way, way more difficult than writing a novel. In fact, so difficult that I've never even tried.
You know what? Lately, because I write poetry, I write novels, I write stories, I write essays, but writing songs, and with chords, I've got a uke and a piano. That's my new predilection. So shall we continue our self-interviews?
Sure.
Okay, so whose turn is it?
I don't know.
Okay, so pick one. Pick a question. We'll both.
I've got both sets of questions, so I guess I'm going to pick. Oh yeah, you clearly did a lot of research to write the novel, but it doesn't feel like a novel that's been stuffed with research, because the characters are so well drawn. Did you find yourself having to pull back, or did it feel so because you knew the people so well, and so the research sort of dropped away and you took over with the characters? I don't know how much.
With the plot and the characters cook, and then sometimes you go like, I better do some research. Like I've never been to Dubai or the Emirates, but I have looked Google Maps. I've done this. I've done the streets of Dubai down to the gold market.
Right.
And I've looked at the gold market that I wrote about. and the boats and the harbor, and then other Ethiopian things that I didn't know. Yeah, sometimes it was like, okay, and 2 weeks later you got the information, but you can't go on until you get the information. So, and I was never a good student research, term paper person. So, but I write plays and musicals and things, and sometimes the research is so inspiring, and it's tedious, but it's great. So yeah, when I had to do research, I did a buttload of research.
Yeah, but it doesn't read like it's overstep. It reads like it's informed, but it seems to arise from the characters. So,
Well,
but that's
good.
tricky.
I put footnotes where I need. I mean, I have captions, and that's where I put a lot of the footnotes. And the captions are, Charles Dickens always had captions. So
I appreciated the glossary at the end because I'm, again, a language person. I wanted to know what those words meant. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, no, I got family trees and glossaries, and I mean, you read these big novels, and they have that, and I mean the big Russian novels and things like
the
that.
names, right? You need that. Yeah.
So anyway, another question for you. You can pick one.
Dave is taking over.
Okay, how do you see the relationship of truth and actual experience to your fiction and fiction in general?
Yeah,
that's a hard one. See, I mean, I think the truth is what comes through. You can have real life events that don't work in fiction, and fiction that is more true than what really happened. So that you're striving for truth. But again, and we've all heard that, yeah, but this really happened. In workshop, this isn't work, but it really happened. Too bad. I think, I mean, you try for emotional truth, and you try to be accurate about. I'm very picky about certain, fact things, but the bigger issue of truth, is looking for that emotional truth, and does this seem believable for these characters? So I don't know what do you see as, back at you, that same question?
Well, I try to see, like, what can I get away with? It's like, okay, here's what happened. Or it's based on that little incident in the market.
Right.
And now, can I have these little girls trying to upset the table by pretending to fall on it and steal fruit? Because I saw them chasing some kid in the market in Ethiopia once. Right. And then how can I make that dramatic and get the reader to, like, just go with it? And I'm making it up. It's a big old lie, but it's maybe truer than the truth, because it will portray the market and the emotions of the kids. So that's a real fun game. I mean, you do
take notes when you're traveling there. Do you take notes, or how do you just sort of replay the day, or how do you keep, when you're there and absorbing the atmosphere, how do you bring it back?
Usually when I'm in Ethiopia, I'm writing about Burlington. And when I'm back in Burlington, I write about Ethiopia and what I absorbed. I mean, I'm sometimes I'm consciously working on paid work from there, so, but I'm very much a believer in that the inscrutable shit that goes into your heart when you start to visualize and do the work of writing it down, it will come out. I mean, I've been a writer for 45 years, and it will come out. It might come out in total garbage, cliched form in the first draft. But by the third draft, you might have something, pretty cool.
Most of the people that are in these boxes here are writers.
Cool.
So if how
would you answer that question?
You box people.
Yeah, the relationship of truth to what you write.
Has a question in the chat.
Me? Are you asking me, or asking?
No, I'm asking other people.
I want to hear. Yeah. I mean, we're always striving for that. So.
Julie had a question in the chat. So Julie, why don't you just unmute and ask them?
Yeah. Hey, Julie.
Hey, Jan. Hey, David. Thanks
Hi.
for leading this discussion tonight. It's great to hear you both. My question was, what was the biggest risk you took, each of you, in writing your book?
Mhm, mhm. Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah. And
Oh,
I'll-
I mean, I'm an actor who sometimes goes out on stage not knowing what I'm going to do, improvising. So the risks I took in this book were huge. The cultural appropriation to write in the voices of Ethiopian girls and African-American women and stuff like that, you know, and officials. So I just said, you know, I won't let that stop me. And if I get a lot of shit for it, maybe I'll get attention and then I can sell the book.
Yeah,
mean-
go ahead.
I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, that's the risk there. The other risk was just writing a novel. I'd never done it,
yeah.
you know, but it was
Similar.
great. I mean, we're artists, and the risks we take with our writing are the joy, aren't they?
Yeah, well, Julie saw earlier versions of my novel, and I was, I'm not an adoptive mother. It felt risky for me to try to find the voice of Pearl, the adoptive daughter, and I felt very trepidatious about that. I was really worried. And this was before things really heated up in terms of cultural appropriation, but I worried about that. And, but I have friends who are birth mothers, friends who are adoptive mothers, friends who, I talked to people who had been through some of those experiences, but that was the thing. The biggest risk was trying to get those voices, I think. And again, writing saying, I think I can write a novel. That was pretty risky. So.
I was trying to get to the place where I will point out that almost everybody in these boxes on screen is a writer. Mm-hmm. So you all have experience to answer all of these questions. And if we can break it out a little bit so that it's not all just questions to David about his books or to Jan about her books or whatever. What's your experience with this stuff that is coming up? Feel free.
And also, I just want to point in, we're talking about race right now.
Yes.
And that's dynamite.
Sure.
That's really dynamite. And it's really necessary for us to keep talking about it from our own crazy perspectives and individual perspectives. So we cannot be intimidated.
So Lynn had her hand up.
Well, I did, but thank you. I'm delighted to be a part of this conversation, but I wasn't going to go to the area of race and appropriation and the cultural times that we live in. I was going to go to a kind of writerly question. And that is, both David and Jan have written beautiful books. And you've both spoken about it takes a long time to write a novel. You often start with one idea, it goes somewhere else. And the process of drafts, many drafts, sometimes countless drafts. I'm curious to know, when you come to the last stages, when you think your book has the basic shape and form you want, what do you do in your last draft? What are the last questions you try to solve? What are the last things that you work on in the final go through?
And Lynn is at that point with her current novels. I am very envious of her that she's at that point.
So that's why I'm curious. Give me some tips, folks. But I do want to know what it is for you two and anyone else. When, a novel is a big and shapely or unshapely thing. It's a big thing. So at the last dress rehearsal, what do you do? Where do you put your attention?
I see Diane is here. She's written a number of novels and has a new one coming out.
I don't know if this is an answer for anyone else, but I think a lot of times I'll go back to the opening, which very often I loved my opening, and it may still be the opening, but I try to make sure that the opening pages tells the reader how to read the novel, because they're about to embark on something big and maybe shapeless, maybe very baggy. So I try to give some hint of the context early on. And if that looks like it will carry through the rest of the book, then I figure it's done. But then I change my mind. But that's one thing I do.
I want to say something horrible, which is that the idea that the novel, or whatever you write, but the novel is finished, that's a phony idea. And it particularly shows up from our point of view as editor and publisher. Because when you think you have something finished, you send it to us, and then we start a process, of criticism and back and forth and rewrites. And then you think then we all think, well, it's pretty good. It's pretty, almost maybe it's finished. And then we publish a draft on pages. And then you look at it again and it's not finished, right? So the whole idea of how do you know when it's finished is at least in this operation, is a kind of group acquiescence to this is starting to vibrate as well as we can make it with this, with the material. So it does start out as an individual sort of effort, but it ends up as a team effort.
Yes, and I should say that process, this latest novel, the process I just mentioned to you, Lynn, was a process I went through after Mark had trouble understanding what I was doing in the novel. So yes, it was that back and forth.
Here's what I did with this big monster, like 123 short chapters. I checked out the chronology, that I had everything accurate, chapter 5 did not contradict chapter 4, or in my case, chapter 79 did not contradict chapter 14. I made sure everybody's ages were right over a span, and then I proofread like hell, and then I went through one more time and cut out the repetition. If I said something in paragraph 2 that I said in paragraph 1, I'd take a sentence or two. I went through it one more time for concision.
One thing that I was advised to do was to pull certain threads through that had, and this was probably a lingering vestige of the linked stories, but just like there's room for her best friend here and there's room for her best friend there. And, this is a big, so these kinds of things, and what are the things that, could be best pulled through, and then get rid of other stuff.
Right.
I have one thing to say. Can
Hey,
anyone?
William?
Hey, so I took a bunch of writing classes in college, and one of the best writing quotes I learned was a quote from William Carlos Williams when he said about one of the poems he wrote, were I a younger man, it probably would have been a different poem altogether, but then again, it probably wouldn't have been written after all. And I think, and that's, I'm looking back at what I wrote back in college and what I'm writing now, and it's like I look at it, and I'm just like, maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe there's some truth that when we're younger, we have write one draft, and then we're happy with it. But then when we're older, we want to write a completely different draft altogether.
You're a different person. Yeah. Yep.
Jan.
Yes.
I would love to hear from everybody the question, the answer to the question that I asked, which was, when I read what I wrote, my first novel, my first big prose explosion, I almost got tearful about all the influences I saw in my work. It took me about a year away from it to go say, oh, Faulkner, oh, Dickens, oh, Mark Twain, oh, Dumas, oh, Mary Carr, oh, Flannery O'Connor. Whoa, look at that. So I want, I just kind of laid out some of my influences. The stuff I saw in my work reflected back at me from other people I'd read. And I've read incessantly novels since I've been 6 years old. So I wanted to, that's mine. But what's Jan? What do you see? What other writers do you see in your work?
Well, okay, I'm not sure I succeeded in putting them in my work, but I'm influenced by many writers. So, I admire many writers. Alice Munro is a favorite of mine. And she has a trilogy of stories I think it's in Runaway, where a daughter goes missing. And that was an influence, that influenced this novel, the idea of just somebody's gone all of a sudden. So that was Alice Munro, her whole work, but those stories in particular. I was influenced by Elizabeth Strout, and when I was still particularly in the linked story things, Olive Kitteridge, but there's so many writers I admire, but those were two whom I look to sort of specifically for this. But I'm I'm not saying that, and when you have, you have to sort of come up with who are the people like you, and that always makes me so uncomfortable, because I just waiting for people to say, no, you're not like her at all. But those are people I admire. So I'll go that far.
Uh-huh. Anybody else want to talk about, I mean, I was so amazed to see, Pasternak, and traces of.
You were able to see it. That's amazing.
Oh, and Faulkner. Oh, consciously Faulkner.
See, I can't see those things in my
and
work.
Dickens. I mean, I just stole so much from these people. Sometimes I knew I was stealing, and sometimes I didn't know I was stealing. But it's, just celebrating the novels that had flowed through me into that work was a really joyful thing. So, Estrin, are you there, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious if we went around and said, like, who really gotcha, for the, in a specific book.
I have the advantage of being an illiterate.
Uh-huh.
And
Right.
so, I'm not influenced by anybody, and I don't, I remember at one point thinking, I had read Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus, and there's a section in Dr. Faustus where he describes somebody's giving a lecture on the last Beethoven piano sonata, and I thought, wow, I wish I could write like that. But that was like when I was 20, and I didn't write anything until I was 50, 55?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, mid-50s. And in that time, I became solidly illiterate. That is, I was a chemistry major in college, and we didn't read anything. And then I was a graduate student in microbiology, and we didn't read it, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have anything. I had to make it up from scratch.
What about Bonnie? Who were your influences?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Bonnie Siebold. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm just
Hey,
curious.
well, I'm not an active writer right now. I
We'll
have
date
written
ourselves too, but that's okay.
But Flannery O'Connor is a big influence, and I need to read more Alice Munro, Jan. You reminded me, because the few things I've read I've loved. But yeah, she was a big influence. But I'm an English major, both undergraduate and graduate, so Shakespeare. Just a lot of the typical ones that you would name. But right now I'm reading Louise Glick.
Oh, yeah.
Lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Yeah. I need to start writing again. This is inspiring me. This is a wonderful conversation.
Oh, don't stop writing. Don't.
Glad I'm
never.
here. I know.
Mary Ellen, are you a writer?
Who are we looking at?
Mary Ellen.
Beveridge?
Yeah.
Hi, I just unmuted myself. I'm a short story writer, and Mark and Donna published my first collection in 2020, and the next one's coming out in mid-June.
What are the titles?
The first one is After the Hunger, And it's mostly about the post-war generation, which I'm part of, the post-World War II generation. And it's also
What
about
country?
US.
Okay.
You can tell by my accent. And it's also about families that aren't quite working because of the stresses of the war and the post-war period. And the next collection is a little bit more diverse in a way, but I think it's about people in a lot of ways looking for a place, a home, as the characters often are in the first collection as well. And I know it said that you find out what you're writing about after you've finished writing it. And I had to do Mark and Donna asked me to do, as I'm sure you all did, sort of a summary on the back of the book, the back cover. So that really made me have to think about what these stories are. And anyone who's written short stories and tries to put them together in a book, it can often be difficult to work with themes. I felt, because I was writing each story individually, I didn't have an idea of the whole when I was putting them together. And they were written over a number of years as well. And I think the last one got published, I think a year, maybe around the same time that the first collection was accepted. But they go back over a number of years as well. And I remember thinking about the first story I had published. It was the Georgia Review. I was so happy with that. And I thought I'll never surpass this story. It's just so wonderful. And then I was so happy to see that I had grown over time with my own work. And so that was a nice feeling too, to see my own growth over time writing these stories. So
Well, I've been writing since I've been 15, and yeah, just keep going and have that faith.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the best thing you might want to do, and perfecting it is forever. So, but who have you read that comes out in your work? I was so amazed to look at my work with this big novel, and then all of a sudden, all these voices I'd read since I was 6 years old were there.
Well, I made errors. I'm sure we all make these errors. You read someone and then you become them, but in a sort of third-rate kind of way. Like, I think Faulkner's a huge trap. Hemingway certainly is. But I was also reading some things in different ways, like how families are looked at. And Tolstoy's Anna Karenina is so beautiful in terms of this search, that Levin is doing, and thinks it's somewhere, the answer is somewhere, but it's totally somewhere else. It's this, I'm sure you've all read it, but it's this beautiful quest, I think, for who we are. But anyway, I tend to fall into those traps of reading someone and then I start to write like they do too, but in a less polished way. So I have to be careful about that. But I too was an English major in undergraduate and 2 graduate programs as well. So I've read a lot of literature.
Does anyone want to talk about their influences?
I'm going to break in just for a second to remind everybody that it's 8 o'clock. So if anybody needs to leave, don't feel guilty, but we can continue on as long as we want. John.
Yeah, I have a question I'd like to ask, and of any of the writers here. We know how fraught the whole question of cultural appropriation is. And there are all kinds of considerations that go into writing about oneself. But what are the ethics for a writer or prudential concerns about using material from friends or family when you write?
I would say write it first. Say fuck that shit. This is what I'm gonna write, and do a first draft and then look at it and then deal with that question. But if you stop that concern from you just putting it out there raw, you won't understand its relevance, its dangers, unless you just go for it and cut that shit out in your first attempt.
Yeah, well, as you know, John, I've struggled with this a lot, and I have a lot of anxiety and qualms about using things that might be part of someone else's life. And I've struggled and struggled, and people have said, no, it's different enough, it's fine. But that is something, as you know, I have struggled with and continue to struggle with. We were just talking in our group last night about, how much you use from your own family. Do you avoid using your family? Do you use your family? And they're important questions, but they're also tricky. So I would say write it and then decide on it later. I've had the problem of the anxiety up front, so it's hard for me to write it. And that's why it's taken me so long.
Question of cultural appropriation is quite different from the question of writing about people that you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what Dave was asking about. How do everybody on this screen is white? How do we get to write about Black people in our, or brown people or any other kind of people, right, in our novels if they concern that?
And if you feel that closing in on you when you're writing, oh, this isn't gonna, please the appropriate police, because maybe I'm not appropriate, but if you feel that closing in, just go for the first draft. Go for what you wanted. I mean,
at some point you have to ask that question.
I had a whole show about
you.
It was called Step on Your Symbol. I was really pissed off that the Islam people were doing a thing on Salman Rushdie. So it was called Step on Your Symbol. And I had a symbol, like a trap set symbol. Mm-hmm. I'd be stepping on the flag. I'd be stepping on Muhammad. I'd be stepping on the cross. And then I didn't do that because it was a great idea, but it would,
well, you could have your throat cut.
Yeah. So, I mean, but write the first draft and then see how it fits into your world. But if you feel that appropriate closing in as you're writing, resist it, just say, goodbye, give me 20 minutes,
Well, I think that if you are, you go at it with the right, or with the most positive impulses, and try to be fair and try to be kind, not to treat them with kid gloves, but if you don't go at it through meanness or with a grudge, I think that helps. But I find it a really tricky thing. In my novel, there's a storyline. There's a Burundian family, and some things happen to this family. And I think I portrayed them positively. It's actually based on people we know. They don't know that I use this story, and I continue to feel qualms about having used this story, even though I think it's a positive portrayal. I felt like I should have asked them, but I also didn't feel, I didn't ask them. And now it feels too late. So, yeah, that's a big question, John.
No.
Well, I've wrestled with this a lot also in my work. There's one section of one of my books, which is a monologue by a elderly Black Korean War veteran talking about a formative experience he had while on a wildcat strike at the steel mill where he worked. I'm not Black. I'm not a Korean War veteran. I never worked at a steel mill. I actually have been on a wildcat strike, but da-da. And I found very early on in writing this character, listening to this character, I should say, because that's my approach to characters. I don't, they tell me what to say and I try to say it as best I can. But I had to wrestle a lot in listening to this character and to other characters with this question of appropriating. And it was very similar actually to the question about appropriating stories from people I knew and reaching into their lives with or without their consent and basing stories on them. And I just found that ultimately I felt that dwelling too much on this was just useless bullshit. It's like it's paralytic.
Yeah.
And my obligation as a writer in the world is to just get it right. And we're talking about what you try to do with your last draft. And what I try, the main thing I try to do with my last draft is just, have I heard what the characters were telling me and described it accurately? Have I been true to their experience? And when I've described whatever I've described, because for me writing is just description, have I described it accurately? Have I and if later on it turns out that I can be criticized for bringing a warped perspective to to some of it, then well, so be it. Maybe I have a warped perspective, and I will try to learn from being called out on that. But my primary obligation is to just try to be as accurate as possible about what I'm receiving. So anyway, that's how I deal with that set of issues.
Yeah, I totally concur, which is to, get it flowing and go with it. If you feel properness, it's just appropriate. Now, am I channeling bad things? Just go with it for a while, then you'll sort it out. But if you can get it down, I'm a boy raised in the 50s. I got so much cultural stuff in me in Vermont. I have so much racism and misogyny and shit, in my blood, from my background. And I'm using them. I just use them. And I think sometimes I feel people are a little scared of expressing anger or negativity or I want to die or because they don't want to scare anybody, but just go for it, the first draft, and then see how it applies in a positive manner.
Right.
But all this all the censorship that's going on right now is hard to take. It's hard to take, and it's for good reasons, but it's perverted.
You do always have to be asking yourself, why am I saying this? Is this coming from, is this coming from the kind of toxic stuff that we've all absorbed from the environment?
But sometimes, as me as an actor, I want to personify I want to personify and distill the toxic stuff, and I express that, because I want to embody the government and I want to embody the enemy in rhythm and so people get it. So I think everybody wants to be positive and healing, but sometimes it's okay to go back to the days of being negative and existentialist. And I'm feeling a little bit of crowded in that as a very positive person.
Hi, Rod and Karen. one writer I really admire for his ability to embody other people is Colin McCann, and he works. I've heard him speak about it, and he works really, really hard. He does a lot of interviewing, does a lot of checking of dialogue. You know, when he writes from the point of view of an African American person, he runs all that by friends of his. He's really careful, and his big thing is empathy. And I think, you know, you can have empathy and still express the negative and all of that, but I think he comes from a deep well of empathy, and that's, I think, the key thing. So
That's brilliant. Empathy, yes. Empathy with your
That's his thing,
characters,
yeah.
yes.
So. How about others? I see Rod and Karen are here.
Any more people want to talk about the authors that have flowed through them? I'm always so surprised. I've read so much, and you know, when someone shows up, it's really interesting.
You don't always know, do you? I think it's not always that's the thing. I find it, I've had people say, this reminds me of someone, and I'm like, oh, okay, no idea. Sometimes it's even a writer I haven't read, but it's, you know, so I find it hard to see for myself. So.
Oh, it's funny because sometimes I go, oh, Eudora Welty. Oh, that, you know, in that short story, that little burst of dialogue, that there she is, you know, God bless her, you know.
Yeah.
Do other people write like that when they look at their writing and they go, oh, who's there? Estrin, you got Karl Marx. I know that.
No, I don't think so. I feel like I really count on my lifelong illiteracy, coupled with once I had a first novel published, my sense that, uh-oh, I better start reading some books. and then to be able to read from the point of view of an author and see what somebody else is doing. But by that time, you know, all I could do was count on hearing the characters tell me what to do. And you know, certainly Eudora Welty never told me anything. And I've read a lot of Faulkner, but who could do Faulkner except Faulkner, you know? I don't relate to the question as relevant to my writing.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else who flows through you?
You want to mention somebody?
No.
Are we done?
There are no more questions. Maybe we are.
Okay.
I really appreciate people coming. And again, I apologize for my lateness. I was trying. So, and then, you know, we were able to get in finally, but.
Well, I have one more question, actually,
yes.
Which is, how do you think, what do you think is the optimal format for Fomite Third Thursdays? And so here we have, and we didn't do that, but Dave and Jan sort of did that by themselves, a series of questions. And that was sort of like an interview, like what an interviewer might write down. Here's question number one, here's question number two. But of course, that's quite different from a conversation. And if we were to go with conversations, how would they work? Would they just have the regular sort of organic back and forth of conversations with pauses and have to get up to pee and the cat wants to come in and, you know, whatever? Like, what's a good use of an hour and a half among writers about topics that are not necessarily that are of interest to writers, but not necessarily writing topics? And I don't know what it is. This is the first one, right?
I would suggest, and Jan and I were going to do it, but we're kind of running out of time. Start with a
go till midnight.
No, I can't. I got to eat. But start with 3-minute excerpts from each person's books, and then go into a structured conversation, and then open it up, you know?
I like the common element. I like that you put together our works based on a common element. And I think that's a good way to structure it, whether it's a conversation or a series of more structured questions. I like that there was that common element.
This is the only pair of books among our 200 books that has an obvious common element.
Okay,
Oh, that's
okay.
not true.
Well, probably both of our books will pair with all the others too. So
Sure.
please include us again.
Well, you're always included, right? So yeah, if you have ideas about that, I mean, how it would be good to make the next call. In other words, I mean, this the next third Thursday is coming up, but when we write to our authors, what should we write that will be the most productive or differently productive or whatever? I don't know the answer to that.
I would start with 3-minute readings from each author just to get everyone
Right, that's
get
true.
the
You didn't-
tone.
Nobody knows what anybody, I mean,
Yeah.
it's up to
So,
books.
so introduce the people by a little bit of their work, you know, their little clip, their best little clip,
Yeah,
and then go on.
Well, we have a few minutes till an hour and a half is over. What about you two reading for 3 minutes each?
I could do that. I have to find it. I couldn't find my,
I have,
hang on one second.
it's my book. Okay.
one of them. And John did both covers, right, of your book?
My husband did both covers. Yes, he did.
They look quite similar.
Yes. Yeah, I don't even know, is he still on? I think he is. So yes. So I don't know if you want that. I have a page and a half. So not
Let's
long.
hear it. Let's hear
Okay.
it. I
this-
have to say, just interrupt for 1 minute. When you held up the books, John's covers, I'm lucky enough that I have the twin of the
Of this
Thicker Than
one.
Blood. That he did a pair of them, and I have it on my wall.
Over that
So
way.
that's wonderful, you know.
This is great. Okay, if you want, I'll do a short reading. It's Andrea now, Pearl is 18 months old. So she's been adopted. It's official. Andrea and Pearl head down to the Taste of Chicago, the summer festival in Chicago. And Andrea thinks she sees a man she used to be in love with, an African whom she knew, and they had a bad breakup. And so she's thinking about the whole background of their relationship is now interrupted by Pearl waking up. And this is that. Mama, out. Pearl was awake, leaning forward, straining at the stroller straps. Andrea bussed her on the cheek, wiping a tiny grain of sleep from Pearl's eye, asking if she'd like some ice cream. Pearl frogged her legs happily. Andrea unbuckled her and lifted her, damp and wriggly. She held Pearl's hand and pushed the stroller with the other. If that had been Daniel today, what would she have said to him? That she'd found the resolve to go to graduate school to find a career, that he'd inspired her? He would have loved seeing Pearl, and she'd have been so proud to show him her daughter. They'd have admired each other's children, and they'd have exchanged numbers, but would never see each other again. But if Daniel had gone on to have other children, what thoughts did he have about the daughter he left behind? Not Pearl, this is another daughter. How could he ever have left his child like that? How could he have put his own safety above that of his child and her mother? Andrea could never, under any circumstances, imagine leaving Pearl behind. How could a parent leave except to make the child's life better? It was the only explanation for why Pearl's birth mother had given her up. Yet Daniel had chosen to make his own life better. She saw now that he was right to feel anguish about his choices and to judge himself as a coward. She looked at Pearl, sucking her thumb, and offered her hand, and she matched her steps to Pearl's as they made their way to the ice cream stand. She bought a cup of rainbow sherbet, grabbing several napkins before heading toward a bench near Buckingham Fountain. The spray from the fountain cooled their hot skin. They sat down, and Andrea alternated spooning sherbet into Pearl's mouth, then her own. Good, huh? She asked. Pearl nodded. She sat Pearl on her lap and hugged her, resting her chin on top of Pearl's head. Their bench faced Lakeshore Drive, filling up now with traffic. The northbound cars were moving steadily, but the southbound lane had clogged and someone was honking with repeated bursts of the horn. Out beyond the drive, sailboats bobbed in the wake of motorboats that zigzagged among them, creating waves. As a child, Andrea used to stand at the lake shore, straining to discern the roundness of the earth at the horizon. If she concentrated hard enough, she thought she could make out the hint of a curve. Today, the horizon looked metallic and flat. No sign of anything, not Michigan, the East Coast, and certainly not Europe or Africa. A breeze blew in off the lake, covering them with a cloud of mountain mist. Looking around them, she blurred her eyes so that the families and couples and solitary people gathered on the lawn were all taking part in a village banquet. Mothers and fathers surrounded by children, village elders resting on a bench, women dancing and singing, children kicking a homemade ball around in the dust, instead of what she knew to be the case, that they were tired people who didn't know each other, who would crowd into cars, the bus, and the train, jockeying for position, impatient to make their way home to the ones they loved.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, here's a little bit. Here's the first chapter of the adoption. Everybody ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's captions. I'll read the captions and then go into it. But this is, you've seen a family tree and a little bit of information before you hit the first chapter. And here's the caption. Salamovit remembers the birth of Kalkadane. Then there's a little quote. Many women prefer delivering at home in the company of known and trusted relatives and friends, where customs and traditions can be observed, according to a 2011 study published in the Ethiopian Journal of Health. And this is Salamowit. She's 6 years old. She's remembering the birth of her baby sister. The night my aunties pushed the men and boys out of the tukol and sang hi to Mother Mariam. Bless this child, bring him from heaven, make him strong. Mary, protect him. That was the night that Kalkadane, my sister, was born. When the big ropes squeezed Nigest's tummy, she groaned and yelled, and we all cried so loud so her sound would not be alone. Lushan, though she was the littlest, screeched the highest. I'm sorry, there's this noise in the background. I don't know where it's coming from. When the aunties went out of the tukol, I went too. The men waited outside with their torches, drinking by the fire pit. The aunties put the birthstones on each other's shoulders and stagger danced in the compound, crying, Mother Mariam, give us the burden, take the pain from Nigest, put it on our shoulders. And then we went back into the tukol. The ropes squeezed more and more. Mother Tenege pushed us aside and said, it is time. Mama pushed and yelled and we screamed with her, and the aunties and me and Lushan so loud that the noise could stop anything. I got to the end of the bed and I saw everything. The brown head coming out, and Mother Tenege putting her hands inside of Mama and pulling her out, and the tube that looked like what came out of an ox when Father killed it, all blood and yellow fat. She held the baby by the feet and showed us the girl part. And the aunties gave the cry so the men would know that it was a girl. Mother Tenege slapped her bottom and she gulped in air and she made a sound like a kid goat. Meh! And all the aunties clapped and laughed when she changed color and she turned bright. Auntie Ferawat wrapped her in big leaves and she took a grass flower from a glass and tickled her nose until she sneezed. Wait a second, I got lost here. Oh yeah, here we are. And tickled her nose until she sneezed. And the aunties clapped again. Mother Tanegi tied the tube tight in 2 places, close together with string, and cut the tube between the knots with her razor. And then she tied the end that came out of Mama to Mama's leg. I was surprised at what came out of Mama. I asked Auntie Almanesh if the same stuff was in me. Not yet, she said, but it would be when I was a woman. I asked her, will I have to be a woman? And she said, yes. She brought butter and rubbed Mama's belly while Mother Tanegi pressed a big bottle on her tummy. And when Mama sighed, oh, now give me the baby, Mother Tanegi replied, not yet, wait until the rest is out. And she rubbed more butter on Mama's tummy. Auntie Mateson pressed some more until there was a wet sound and a piece of meat came out of Mama, all green and yellow and bloody. Mother Tanegi held it up for all the women to see. The auntie said, ooh, and Mother Tanegi put the meat in a dish and the women prayed 7 times to Mother Mariam. Oh, Mother Mariam, thank you for giving Nigas this child. Oh, Mother Mariam, give this baby health and make her strong. Oh, Mother Mariam, she'll be your daughter. Oh, Mother Mariam, her sons will honor you. Auntie Mateson told me that 7 times was for a girl. She poured water on the baby while Auntie Federwat held her, and the baby's goat cry got louder. Nah, nah, nah. They held her up for Mama to see, and Mama put the bracelet on her ankle, the same bracelet that Lushan and I have. And Mama held her up and put her to her titi. I wanted to hold her and Lushan wanted to too, and they told us no. And Lushan cried and they made us get out of the tukol.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first chapter. That's when the kid is born, the adopted kid.
Yeah,
Ends up in Chicago, you know.
that's terrific. Terrific. Thank you.
So that's from the adoption. That's Salamat.
I have a question. Did you witness that?
No, but I saw my own kid get born.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw another, and I helped deliver another child.
Mm-hmm.
And I read up a lot on birth in Ethiopia.
But you didn't actually see a birth in Ethiopia?
No, it was
because it was
San
so
Francisco
it seemed so real. I felt as if you had. So
well,
that
you
was,
know, I mean, part of imagining is to work at, you know, to go further.
yeah.
And
Thank you. That's great.
And I mean, I can't care if it is real for a while. You know, it's my fantasy, and it may be a stupid fantasy from a white, balding Jewish guy, you know, born in 1949, but I have to go there.
Could you
And then
deliver a baby?
Huh?
Could you deliver a baby if you had to?
Well, there's no question if you had to. I mean, that's a stupid
Would
question.
you do the right thing?
That's a really stupid question. I mean, if I'm in that circumstance, I will deal with it, you know, but like, nah, I mean, who the fuck knows?
Well, you
Of
could
course
deal with it and
I
kill the baby.
could. Of course I could. And the child would come back when I'm 99 and thank me, you know.
My son who's left, but he was working, and he looked out at a health club, and he looked out the front door and saw a woman on the ground giving birth. And it was 5 a.m. He raced out and caught the baby.
Whoa.
As this was her 7th child. So that baby just right. And he was the first one on the scene. And then a doctor came, but yeah, he had this experience. So
where was that?
In Chicago next to Swedish Hospital. Yeah.
No kidding, up the north side. He was on the lawn.
She was walking to the hospital and they were next door to the hospital, and she just, you know, this baby was coming. And so he ran out and caught the baby.
She didn't make it in, huh?
No. And then, you know, they came out, and she was 100 yards from the emergency room and just happened to be out front of where he happened to be looking out the window. So
can you please write that story? Really
Yeah, put that in the story.
Yeah.
Please do it. Yeah.
Okay. It was
Well,
something.
I have to go, folks, so.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody, for
Hi, Rod
coming.
and Karen.
Hi,
Bonnie.
People, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you. Lovely.
Mark and
Lovely.
Donna, for doing this. I really appreciate it. So,
Okay,
and
next
thank you,
month.
David. This was fun, Dave.
Next month, third Thursday.
Okay.
Tell your
We'll
friends.
send
Who's
something out.
on?
Not sure yet.
Oh, okay.
Got May set up, but not April.
Well, I mean, Fomite people, how does Mark and Donna do this? I have no idea.
They're amazing.
But
Yeah.
to include ourselves in anything that's Fomite is just a joy. It just
Yeah, it
makes you
really
think
is.
about writing. It just knocks you on the head.
Must
guys.
be time to leave.
Okay, bye.
Bye now.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.